the offensive again. I think Nada knew, of course, that the scan happened on his base, so he knew it was coming. Sorry about the background sound. Someone's vacuuming. I think that's my my mother vacuuming my house. So sorry about that. Anyway, so here we're seeing dropships going south for Nada. Nada is probably going to try to intercept again, but really, I'm sorry, Fantasy might be trying to intercept again, but I don't think Fantasy really is going to get away with not building dropships. He actually has built dropships now. In Terran versus Terran, of course, you need the dropships to break mid-game to late-game siege lines. You really need to take the air superiority, and you need to be able to drop on top of the tanks to break them. Here comes Fantasy with a tank push, though. Nada is going to have the high ground, and Fantasy has 2 dropships of his own, but I think Nada has more Goliaths, more tanks, and more dropships, so really his macro advantage is starting to show at this point. Nada going to drop all over the tanks. This is exactly what I meant. Could Nada, I think Nada might be able to break up here, break this attack. No, looks like Nada actually does not. Will he manage to get through? I think actually no. This is going to come very close, but Nada actually does break through. Wow, I didn't see all those forces coming from behind, so that drop was very successful. Nada is now firmly in the lead now, and he's going to be able to attack with almost impunity here at the natural expansion. Will Fantasy be able to hold on? I'm not sure if Fantasy can hold on. If Nada loads up a couple more tanks in those dropships, he can get within range of those sieged up tanks. He can drop on top of those sieged up tanks and further get closer to the main base of Fantasy. Fantasy, meanwhile, having a siege tanks under fire, and of course in Terran versus Terran, you want to be on the tactical defensive even when you're on the offensive. And the second gas going down now for Fantasy. Fantasy in huge trouble now, and I think Nada has the game comfortably in hand at this point. Nada loading up with a couple more actually, it looks like SCVs are going to repair the dropship. I almost thought for a second he was going to drop SCVs on top of the tanks, but that doesn't make any sense, of course. He's got a couple more tanks probably loaded up, and he's going to be able to drop on top of those siege up tanks that are the last defense for Fantasy. Nada's 14 command center has paid off, and you know, for all the people who say 14 command center is generally a bad idea, I mean, I do think generally now it is a bad idea because people have found a good counter for it, but when it works, it works. If your opponent doesn't counter it with a fast rush, either a 2-factory or a Wraith rush, and they go for a standard factory into fast expand, they're just going to be behind. I mean, they're going to be behind unless they manage to do some incredible harass on you, and for a significant amount of time, as was shown in this game. Looks like Fantasy pushing out and managing to pick off a couple more tanks. Here comes Fantasy with a counter drop, though, and I don't think Nada's ready for this, so Nada could be in trouble here. 4 Goliath drop for Fantasy in the back of Nada's base here at his natural expansion. And actually, Fantasy is going to be able to do a lot of economic damage, just could even up the game a little bit, because Fantasy looks like he's managed to hold his line at his natural expansion. 2 glides coming down for Nada, but unfortunately Nada was not really well prepared to this. He loses at least 10 SCVs there, and that is going to set him behind a little bit. But in the meanwhile, Nada has taken his second natural there at the 1 o'clock position. Oh, Nada trying to build a missile turret to intercept that dropship, almost gets it. But yeah, and Fantasy's far away from getting his expansion at the 3 o'clock location, his second gas. In fact, I think he's running off of just 1 gas at the moment right now. And he's dropping Goliaths on top of the sieged up tanks, and actually I think he'll be able to break the contain here. Yeah, he will be able to break Nada's tank contain. Unfortunately, Nada just didn't have enough troops there to be able to deal with a dropship play like that. Nada now transferring SCVs, still solidly on 3 bases, and actually Fantasy has actually managed to pick up a hidden expansion there at the 7 o'clock location. I did not see that coming. I don't think the Observer saw it either, but yeah, so he's getting a 3rd base up, so he's not that far behind economically. And I think he's done an admirable job of somehow holding Nada off. I didn't think he was going to be able to survive, but I think Nada was distracted by that Goliath drop, forced to pull some units back, and then he lost that 4 tank contain in the front through a good drop by Fantasy. So Fantasy now has transferred SCVs to that southwest corner. I'm not sure if Nada has spotted, though. There are 2 Goliaths there, and actually Nada has spotted the new expansion. He's going to be sending in those Goliaths, but Fantasy, smartly enough, has gotten a tank over there in position, so he's going to be able to hold against these 2 Goliaths at least, but Nada probably is going to send a large task force there, maybe by dropship or maybe by foot. We'll have to see. And looks like an SCV scouting here in the north. I think he pretty much, I think Fantasy knows what Nada has. Nada might be trying to set up an expansion at the left side of the map, though, at the top left. Yeah, he is setting up another command center, so going for his 4th base now. And Fantasy might be pushing out here. I think Fantasy is still economically and unit-wise quite behind. And you could see by the food count, he's about 15 food count behind, although he has a good amount in the bank, so not that far behind. But he needs to do some damage to Nada, I think. He can't just let Nada keep macroing up. I think Nada probably is going to get an upgrade advantage soon too also, given that he has had more resources for a while. Fantasy with a good line of missile turrets there, actually. He might be able to pick off at least one of the dropships as they come. And Nada might be just deterred here from doing a drop on Fantasy's main because of those missile turrets. Anyway, shout out to one of my Swedish viewers from Uppsala. Remember that Parasite and Marine story I was telling you guys about? Well, he actually took that idea and wrote a short story about it. Wrote a whole short story that's actually really excellent. He took the idea and basically wrote a story and emailed it to me, and I had really a lot of fun reading it. I will ask him if how he wants to distribute it if he wants to. I mean, obviously it's his right to it. So maybe he'll allow us to all read it though, and that would be very exciting, I think, for you guys too. Anyway, Nada dropping on the left side of the map now. He's going to lose one dropship full of units though. Good play there by Fantasy, focusing on the dropships instead of letting his Goliaths just shoot the tank as it came out. What Nada was trying to do there was drop one tank to distract the Goliaths. But anyway, Nada has siege position now on the bottom expansion of Fantasy's. Fantasy, meanwhile, though, seems to be ignoring it. He's going for an attack on Nada, but Nada's, I think, pretty well prepared at his front there. He has a good little defensive contain there, and I think you will be able to protect against a drop. But meanwhile, Fantasy needs to bring his troops back. He's going to lose that expansion at the 9 o'clock position and possibly the expansion at the 7 o'clock location, and that'll set him far, far behind this game. Fantasy, yeah, looks like, whoa, he's forced to lift 2 command centers, and I guess he's trying to run away with the command centers, interesting enough. I'm not sure why he has 2 command centers. But once again, Nada in a bad position. He didn't have any supporting units with those sieged up tanks. And I think this is a mistake from Nada, definitely a mistake. Fantasy losing a dropship there, though. And he's going to lose 2 dropships. Nice work there by Nada saving his position with the Goliaths coming up. I didn't see those Goliaths coming up. But what I was going to say was that Nada would have been making a mistake had he not had some support units nearby. Meanwhile, Fantasy floating command center, I think what he was trying to do is take that corner expansion. I think he will actually be able to take it, but once again, Nada's forces getting taken down there at the lower left. And Nada's attacks so far have not been very successful, even though he's kept on the offensive. And certainly he's ahead in the unit count still, 30 food ahead of Fantasy in this game so far. Nada with another 4 dropship group here coming to the south, and looks like he's going for another drop, and this is what I love to see. Terrans dropping at multiple locations, keeping their opponent off guard and off balance, off kilter. And here comes Nada with a large drop here, but Fantasy has managed to react actually. Oh man, Nada needed to take out that tank. That one tank that was heavily damaged should have been taken down by Nada. And Nada looks like this drop will fail once again. Fantasy with some good reaction time and good anticipation. If Nada had gotten there and Fantasy didn't react, that expansion will be down in a matter of maybe 30 seconds. But the good thing is what Nada is doing is keeping Fantasy on the defensive through this entire game. Fantasy has not been able to harass any of Nada's attempts at expanding, whereas Nada has kept harassing Fantasy, and really that's what you need to do. You'll slowly gain an advantage, even if every time you lose your forces. As long as you keep your opponent on the defensive, you'll eventually take the game. And wow, Nada picking off a lot of SCVs there on the left side. I think Fantasy has actually overextended himself with almost a triple expand there on the left. Perhaps panicking a bit and building 3 command centers at the 7, at the 7:30, and at the 9. And now all 3 are not mining. I think one of them might be completely taken out, actually. The 8 o'clock one, I think, was burning the last time I saw it. Meanwhile, Nada has slowly expanded. He's picked up his second natural, of course, and now 2 expansions of the upper left. By the way, the second natural of Fantasy, I think, is up. I think Nada didn't have position on long enough to stop it completely, and now it's up. So really, 5 bases versus 3 here that are actually functioning. Nada now dropping the main base of Fantasy. This is a large game-ending force, but Fantasy has reacted very, very quickly, managing to get the unsieged tanks on top of the sieged up tanks of Nada, and very nice counter drop by Fantasy, managing to save the day again. Unfortunately for Nada, if he had just kept his tanks unsieged for maybe 5 seconds longer, if he had known that drop was coming, he would have, I think, won the battle with his tanks, and he would have won the game. But unfortunately, Nada lost the entire force there, and now still 30